to Thor Nystrom, giving the Patriots an F for the draft and joining us right now. Here on Jones and Mego with Arcan on WEEI is Thor Nystrom of Fantasy Pros. What's going on, Thor? Welcome back.
How you guys doing?
We're doing great. I got to be honest. I graded it a B. I'm no expert, though, and a lot of people seem very high on the draft here. It was refreshing to see a different perspective on the draft. Why F?
Well, so I'll say first off, I always have to give this context. I grade on a curve. So every single year there's 2 A pluses, there's two Fs. And the way that I do that, it's based on an ROI metric that I do right after the draft, where I'm comparing where my board was at in comparison to where the teams drafted the guys. So you have a modified trade chart where the points are put onto the slots that the teams picked, and then you also put that onto where those guys were on my board, my 500 board, whatever. And you could say that the Patriots and I did not agree on the way that we viewed the prospects this year.
I want to ask you particularly about Wallace, the tackle that they took in the 3rd round. How do you feel about the idea of him playing left tackle and where they decided to fill that huge area of need, if he is going to be left tackle, in their draft process?
I just, I think it's going to take a while there. There's a lot of polishing there that needs to happen. They obviously think that he is closer than I did. The left tackle thing in particular, and especially if they think that is going to happen early on, I think that is concerning for me. I don't see that. To me, that was more of a project guy taken later on, and maybe a couple years. There's some things to like there as far as for the future, but to me, that was more of a developmental project type guy. And so looking at him as a guy that in the short term could play left tackle, that would be concerning to me, I think.
So for the first time, Thor, this is the first time since we can even remember that they drafted this many offensive players. What's your sort of take on teams that do that go almost all either offense or defense and take a bunch of stabs at certain positions? How much more likely is that to sort of improve their chances on hitting on someone?
Well, in this class, that's something I certainly would have advocated for. This was such a good offensive class, and we saw that with the record 14 straight guys going off the board at the jump. So the inclination, I think, was there certainly, and a lot of different teams went that direction. Next year, you have sort of a different thing qualitatively. Defense, I think, is going to lead the dance as far as that goes. So I definitely didn't have any issue with that. And, I say in the write-up vis-a-vis the Patriots draft where if Drake Maye becomes a superstar, this draft is a smashing success. It's all going to come down to that. So, and I've acknowledged many times that Drake Maye has that ceiling. I think I see Drake Maye's ceiling similarly to a lot of other people. I was slightly lower on him than some. I ranked him 8th overall in the class, just because I think there's a little bit higher risk there, just because there's some what I refer to as weeds in his game that I think need to get pulled out initially, and I've what I would do is exercise some patience there initially, and go slow with him initially, and try to pull some of those different things out, early on in his career, start him on the bench. But that's what it's going to come down to with this Patriots class.
Thor Nystrom, Fantasy Pros, joining us here on Jones and Mego with Arcan. We were just reading from your overview, the F that you gave the Patriots. You had some great numbers, I think, numbers that I hadn't seen anywhere else. On Jalen Polk, you feel like it was a reach. Why do you feel that way? Effectively because you called him fool's gold, I think. He was really the 3 in the offense, despite the numbers looking like he was the number 2 there.
Yeah, that's right. Jalen Polk, I think if Jalen McMillan, the other Washington receiver outside of Roma Dunze, if Jalen McMillan never gets injured in September last year, I don't know that Jalen Polk goes above the 5th round in this class. When Jalen McMillan gets injured in September, that was when Jalen Polk, who had always been the obvious and clear wide receiver 3 after those guys had distant wide receiver 3, he finally steps into the wide receiver, gets elevated to the wide receiver 2 role. I think it was 4 of the next 5 games he goes over 100 yards. The issue is when, and McMillan's out then at this point. And McMillan tries to work his way back in October, a couple different games, but his knee wasn't up for it. The cutting wasn't working, so he immediately had to get yanked from those games. McMillan doesn't end up coming back until later on in November. But down the stretch there, Jalen Polk, during the run of Washington going to the CFP, the national championship game and stuff like that, Jalen Polk goes back to being the wide receiver 3, in particular when McMillan gets back on the field. Polk over the last 5-6 games was averaging less than 40 yards a game. 2 of those games in one of the country's most high-powered offenses during this run where they go to the national title game against the better defenses. 2 of those games, even though he was active and healthy, he has 0 catches. The stat that I put in there for people to consider on this, in the 20 games the last 2 seasons when Jalen McMillan and Jalen Polk both completed full games together at Washington, Jalen McMillan, 124 catches, 1,657 yards, 14 touchdowns. Jalen Polk, 68 catches, 1,210 yards, 9 touchdowns. When those 2 guys were on the field together, Jalen Polk was way behind Jalen McMillan as far as in the offensive pecking order as the wide receiver 3, and yet Jalen McMillan goes, 55 slots later than him. To me, that's just the context of the situation of the the injury that happened in September. If you look at the 2022 stuff of Jalen McMillan and compare that to the stuff of Polk this past season, I think it's pretty clear that Jalen McMillan, or at least in my eyes, is a better receiver than Jalen Polk. And I think Kalen DeBoer, the Washington offensive guy, their head coach that is now the coach at Alabama, it seems from the usage that he had and the way he was using those guys that he agrees with me.
Okay, but what if you throw Polk into a situation where the only other real weapons are a tight end in Hunter Henry and an undersized, pretty much slot guy in Demario Douglas, and he gets a lot more targets? Could we see his numbers improve? Do you think his game itself translates to what the Patriots are probably going to be looking to do under Alex Van Pelt?
So it seems like they might be viewing him, because you have Pop Douglas there in the slot. It seems like that position is accounted for. I see we might just have a disagreement, they and I, the way that we see his evaluation. Jalen Polk played on the outside at Washington predominantly. He did moonlight in the slot a bit, but that was more the role that McMillan played when he was on the field. And this was across from Roma Dunze, obviously, who's on the other boundary and taking all the attention away that we know that Roma Dunze gets, whatnot. The thing that I like about Polk, I love his hands. That speaks for itself. The guy doesn't drop anything, but I don't believe that he has the athletic traits to be able to win on the outside in the NFL consistently in the way that you're going to want for one of your 2 guys out there. I saw him as a non-explosive slot receiver, an efficiency guy for sure. He's going to catch anything within his kitchen, absolutely, but not a guy that is going to stretch the defense down the field.
Is he like Jacoby Myers?
Could see that. Yeah, I mean I think that would be on the higher end of the if the bonanza could of the sort of spectrum there. But yeah, when I'm looking in the slot, I want to have more upside there, as far as the explosive element, stretching the defense just a little bit more. And just as far as something like that, McMillan is, as far as like the efficiency guy, elements of his game working out of the slot a little bit more. I've seen him push the defense a little bit more down the field as a slot.
All right, so you think they reached on Polk, but according to your writing, you like the pick of Javon Baker. What do you like about him, and do you think he should have been picked sooner than he was? He thinks that. Do you think that?
I love Javon Baker. So this is the pick that the Patriots made that I absolutely adored. I think that this one is a steal, and I think people missed it on Javon Baker during this process, in part because of circumstances. He comes out as a ballyhooed recruit, signs with Nick Saban's Crimson Tide. It's no shame that you couldn't get on the field initially when you're surrounded by NFL first and second round picks there at Alabama. So then he goes to UCF. His ADOT, you look at that past couple of years, was one of the highest in the FBS, and he was a downfield killer. So people might have seen him as a one-trick pony. But if you take the time to go through his entire cut-ups, you're going to notice something really interesting. That kid wins at every level of the field when he was afforded the opportunity to do that. The Gus Malzahn offense, they throw it down the field so often. So that was the aspect of his game that was leveraged. Plus, UCF, they had John Rice Plumlee, who is this halfway baseball player on the side. Accuracy was not really his thing, but he could push the ball down a little bit, and then he'd get injured. The backup quarterback would come in. The throwing over the intermediate level, hitting him, Javon Baker on the hands in space, was not at the forte of the quarterbacks that they had there. But he could do all that different stuff. You would see it. He has this dynamic release package. I think I have my write-up. You better bring your tap dance shoes and your boxing gloves with him off the line. Gives you a different look every single time. Like I said, love the hands, love the route running with him, wins at every level, good after the catch, certainly good down the field. And he is a competitor. The other thing with Javon Baker, and you guys are already getting a sense of his attitude, and this might be part of I think this is explicitly part of the reason, too, why he fell down the board. Javon Baker ardently believes that he was this class's best receiver. He believes that. He has this attitude of, I am the best. Last year's Oklahoma game, he got a lot of crap because, he blew the kiss towards the Oklahoma sideline when he had that long touchdown. People forget that was at the end of the first half. Answering an Oklahoma touchdown, that kept UCF close in that game. UCF was close in that game till the very end. A 2-point conversion right before the end would have gotten UCF into overtime with Oklahoma in that game with a chance to pull a huge upset. The only reason they were there is because Javon Baker was lighting up that undefeated Sooner team all game long. That blow in the kiss thing, that was Javon Baker telling the Sooners, like, we are here. You're going to have to deal with me this entire game. That attitude of his, I was talking about this in my write-up and all spring. To me, it reminds me of Stephon Diggs, another guy who had gotten pushed down the board that some people, when they talked to during the pre-draft process, was like, oh, man, I'm not sure about that guy and how he's going to fit into our building. Because Stephon Diggs is another guy who was like, I am way better than all you people think. Put me out there. I will prove it. And it comes across as some people, in a way that they find abrasive or this way or that way. I believe in Javon Baker, and obviously the Patriots do too. I think Javon Baker is going to ascend to the top of the Patriots receiving room in very, very quick order. That's just how I see the kid.
Okay. We'll have our popcorn ready for him. I saw something similar in the Twitch chat, twitch.tv/BostonWEEI, but I do have a similar question. It sounds like you're very high on Javon Baker because he was behind a couple of receivers at Alabama, but when given an opportunity, he thrived. But you're down on Jalen Polk because he proved that he was good when given an opportunity, but then took a back seat. That feels a little inconsistent. Does it come down to the athleticism and the traits you see with Baker? Is that why you're higher on him?
Yeah, Baker, when he was on when he goes to UCF during that time, he was the best player on the field in for instance, that Oklahoma game, last season. He was that dude. It was the circumstances of the offensive situation, the player throwing him the ball, whatever. You can't argue the circumstances as far as Polk goes. When Polk goes to Washington in 2022, he had the same chance that Odunze and McMillan had, as far as targets goes. He's the clear number 3, like I said, in that pecking order. The same thing that he was in 2023 when that season begins. He gets the opportunity during this 5-6 game stretch against some of the lesser Pac-12 defenses. During that stretch when McMillan is off the field. Then when McMillan comes back, Jalen Polk, interestingly, returns right back to where he was before as that tertiary option. And this was during that, again, that was that run to the college football national title. Washington, their prerogative is just to win, right? Like they're not going to make decisions with their offensive usage that go against that prerogative. So to me, that is fairly telling, as far as that goes, and a slight difference.
Okay, you can check out his work, Thor Nystrom, Thor KU. I like to call him Thor Q at Fantasy Pros. Thor, we enjoy your work. Thanks for taking the time.
Appreciate it, guys. Thank you.
All right,
thanks,
Thor
Thor
Nystrom, as all our guests on the Fantasy. Or from Fantasy Pros, rather, joining us here on Jones and Mego with Arcan. So I was thinking the same thing. Twitch, I think it was D. Mornay pointed this out in the Twitch chat. It's like one guy got an opportunity and thrived and he likes him. The other guy got an opportunity, thrived, and he doesn't like him, feels a little inconsistent. I think it comes down to traits. I do also
think like him is underselling it.
No, but he said he's like Stephon Diggs.
He loves him.
But so look, I think those numbers about Jalen Polk are very telling. But Javon Baker couldn't get on the field at Alabama. 617-779-7937. We'll continue here with all your feedback. And one writer in town feels very strongly about an extension for